NFL free agency is just a week away. So coming up on today's show, we're going to recap all of the latest NFL free agency news, rumors, buzz, all that good stuff that pertains to your Cleveland Browns, because the Browns with Andrew Berry are always going to be in the market for acquiring talent. They have a full blessing from Jimmy and Dee Haslam to spend all their money. So let's talk about who they could spend the Haslam's money on this upcoming March. Now, let's start off with some NFL free agency news that's relevant to Cleveland, believe it or not, because Mike Evans this morning signed a contract with the Buccaneers. It was a 2-year, $52 million contract. That's an average of $26 million a season. So take Mike Evans off of the board, and now the Browns, who are openly looking to upgrade their receiving core, will have to look other places. Now, Diana Rossini tweeted this out, and I thought this was very interesting. Multiple teams had Mike Evans on their free agent wide receiver board and were hoping to land him in free agency based on several sources: Titans, Rams, Chiefs, Patriots, Giants, Panthers, Falcons, and Jaguars. No Browns, though. So why are we talking about Mike Evans? Well, I think Cleveland had a pretty good understanding of what Mike Evans' market would be like, and they weren't going to be able to spend $26 million or probably anything close to that for his services, with Amari Cooper being on a 5-year, $100 million contract at the very end of it. So now I want to focus in on the other free agent wide receivers. You've got Michael Pittman, Calvin Ridley, Gabe Davis, and Marquise Brown. I would say those 4 guys are probably in the first tier of free agent wide receivers. After that, you can kind of lump all these other receivers together: Darnell Mooney, Noah Brown, Tyler Boyd, KJ Osborne, Curtis Samuel, and Odell Beckham Jr. Could you imagine an OBJ reunion? But let me start off by addressing the number 1 guy on that board, and I think that would be Michael Pittman Jr. Similar production to Calvin Ridley last year, and he's 5 years younger. However, I think Indianapolis is going to franchise tag Michael Pittman. Now, the franchise tag deadline is tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central. So we will know late tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening, whether or not Michael Pittman will test the free agent market. And if he does, I could see Cleveland picking up the phone and seeing what it would cost to get Michael Pittman to Cleveland. But I feel like Indianapolis is going to franchise tag him. And if they franchise tag him, well, we can look back at that list later on, and you'll see that all the other remaining receivers know we're the big cheese. We're the best guys on the market, and we're going to demand to be paid like it, which means the Browns could get priced out of some of the top remaining guys. Now, before we look at that list one more time, my boss is having every single host here at Chat Sports ask this question to the viewers, so I want to get your honest opinion and feedback. How likely are you to recommend this show to a Browns fan? Scale it 1 to 10 for me in the comment section. 10 being you would do it in a heartbeat, you've done it before. 1 being I'm the worst guy on YouTube, you would never do that. Let me know in the comment section. And also, if you want to give some feedback, don't be afraid. I always want to improve, and I'm always looking to see what I can do better jobs at. Now, let's go back to that free agent wide receivers list. Because let's say Michael Pittman Jr. does indeed get franchise tagged like I think he will. Well, the remaining 3 guys in that top tier, Calvin Ridley, Gabriel Davis, and Marquise Brown, they go into free agency as the top receivers on the market, which means Calvin Ridley, Gabriel Davis, and Marquise Brown, those 3 guys are about to cash in, because anyone looking to sign a receiver, well, those are your top 3 remaining options, and they know that, which means they can drive the price up thinking, who else are you going to get? We're the top 3 guys on the market right now. And that is not very good news for the Browns. Because even if Cleveland wasn't going to get a Mike Evans or a Michael Pittman Jr., well, all the other teams out there looking to sign a receiver, there's 2 less ducks in the pond, which means all the other duckies just got a little bit more expensive, and the Browns aren't looking to get into a bidding war with guys that are really not worth the price they're probably going to get signed to, but they just know they're the top 1, top 2, top 3 receivers in free agency this year. Marquise Brown and Calvin Ridley are 2 very intriguing options. Now, let's start by talking about Calvin Ridley. I think it's important to understand what the trade that went down with Atlanta means for his free agency status in 2024. When the Falcons traded Calvin Ridley to the Jags, it was a very conditional trade based on whether or not he was reinstated, whether or not he met certain measurables and stats and whatnot, and now most importantly, whether or not Jacksonville re-signs Calvin Ridley before March 11th. If they do that, they owe the Atlanta Falcons their second-round pick in this year's draft. However, if they do not re-sign Calvin Ridley before March 11th, they only owe the Falcons their third-round pick. So they have a tough decision to make. Is Calvin Ridley so good that they don't want to risk him testing the open market and going to another team, that they'll re-sign him right now for the price of giving Atlanta their second-round draft pick? If they do let Calvin Ridley hit the open market, this is a player that the Browns and Andrew Berry have explored options and tried to pursue in the past. Don't be surprised if they re-engage interest in Calvin Ridley. Now, as for Marquise Brown, the Arizona Cardinals, they have fully supported Kyler Murray, and he is going to be their quarterback in 2024. So now it is around building around Kyler Murray, and with the Cardinals having the 4th overall pick in the draft, all eyes are on Marvin Harrison Jr. And with that being the expected pick, if the quarterbacks go as I believe, 1, 2, 3 in the draft, like we saw in 2021, Arizona might decide, let Marquise Brown walk. We're not going to pay him what other teams are willing to pay, since the market's now been inflated because there's only a few good wide receivers remaining, with Michael Pittman Jr. getting tagged and Mike Evans being re-signed. We'll just go with Marvin Harrison Jr. as our number 1 wide receiver and kind of go skinny for the rest of our wide receivers instead of getting into a bidding war with other teams for Marquise Brown. So that could free up Calvin Ridley and Marquise Brown, and 2 guys the Browns may explore in free agency. Personally, I don't think Cleveland is going to sign either of those guys. I just feel like I mentioned earlier, they are going to get overpaid in free agency this year. The contract, the number they are going to get is going to be much bigger than people probably would think, but because they are 2 of the top 3 receivers on the market, for anyone looking to sign a wide receiver, this is the crop, and the top of the food chain knows that they're the big cheese and they're going to be asked to be paid like it. So for that reason, with the Browns having some cap space, don't get me wrong, if they were truly, set on getting one of those 2 guys, it wouldn't be impossible to do, but I don't think they've got so much wiggle room and space that they have the luxury of, accepting they probably overpaid a guy or 2. I just don't think that's in the cards for Andrew Berry and the Browns. Now, we're going to look at some other wide receiver options in just a moment, but quickly, I want to tell you guys about our sponsor today, which is Mando. Warmer weather is upon us, and warmer weather, well, let's be honest, it leads to some more sweating and maybe a little bit of stinkiness below the belt. But grab some Mando whole body deodorant and nip body odor in the bud. Put it on your pits, the package, feet, and for whole body freshness. From the makers of Lumi deodorant, Mando is clinically proven to work hard all day. Instead of covering up BO with heavy fragrances, a Portuguese shower, if you will, Mando stops odor at the source, stopping the stink from happening in the first place. Spring into the season with deodorant that can handle the heat. Now, special offer for new customers. You guys can get a $5 off starter pack with our exclusive code and link. So use code CHAT at shopmando.com. That is shopmando.com, shopmando.com, and use code CHAT to get this special offer, $5 off. The starter pack has so many great options to it. It's going to keep you guys smelling nice and feeling fresh all spring and summer long. You can see it's not too big. It's easy to travel with. It's one of my favorite deodorants out there right now. Now, I put all that information in the comments and description of today's video, but get over 40% off your starter pack when you use code CHAT at shopmando.com. shopmando.com with code CHAT for new customers to get $5 off a starter pack with that exclusive code. Now let's bring ourselves back into what we were talking about earlier, which was wide receiver targets for the Browns, with Mike Evans off the board now and other guys Andrew Berry may have circled on his free agency list. If we look at the next tier of wide receivers, these are 4 guys to keep an eye on: Darnell Mooney, Noah Brown, Tyler Boyd, And I'm going to toss OBJ in there for shits and giggles. I think the Browns would have some level of interest, although after the way he played in Baltimore last year, there's a chance OBJ is this year's marquee free agent still available in training camp that everyone talks about signing in July when we're all super bored. So I look forward to doing that in a couple of months. But I don't think there's a real return for OBJ. The Browns moved on from Odell Beckham Jr. mostly because of Baker Mayfield. Once Odell Beckham Sr. put that hit piece out on Baker, it was tough to put the toothpaste back in the tube. However, with Baker gone and maybe some years passing and a Super Bowl ring for OBJ, water could be under the bridge. And if the Browns feel like the price is right, maybe they decide to bring him back. I don't think it's very likely, but I know the Browns have had at least some conversations about a reunion over the last 18 months or so. But the player to keep an eye on in my eyes is Darnell Mooney. He's going to be entering his 5th year in the NFL, former day 3 pick out of Tulane for the Chicago Bears. He had over 1,000 receiving yards in a season not too long ago. Then when Justin Fields took over as quarterback, the two just didn't really click all that well. Toss in DJ Moore and just an overall frustration for a lot of levels on the offensive side for the Bears. And Mooney saw his role and his production regress. Went from being a 1,000-yard guy in 2021 to getting 31 grabs for 414 yards and just 1 touchdown. I think we can all say thank God he didn't have 2 touchdowns in 2023 because that would have flipped a win to a loss for the Browns that one game against Chicago. But Darnell Mooney, I think, is a lower budget free agent signing that has shown the capabilities of being a productive receiver. I'm a fan of Darnell Mooney. I think he's better than the stats indicate, and I think he would complement Deshaun Watson quite nicely as a vertical threat, a speed guy that can really take the top off the defense. And Noah Brown had a nice run for the Texans at the end there when Tank Dell went down. Tyler Boyd has always been a really solid number 3. Curtis Samuel and KJ Osborne are 2 cheaper options to watch for as well. But Darnell Mooney, I think, would be my number 1 tier 2 guy, right? After that initial set of Gabe Davis, Calvin Ridley, and Gabe Davis, definitely someone to watch for with the Ken Dorsey connection. That next tier, Darnell Mooney is my favorite of the bunch. But which wide receiver do you want the Browns to sign this offseason? Let me know down below in the comment section. Some more free agency news I want to hit on before we get on out of here. So we talked about this on yesterday's show, but Christian Wilkins continues to be a very popular topic. The Dolphins officially announced they are not franchise tagging him, which means he will hit the open market in a week or so. And the Browns have been rumored to be a potential landing spot. Here's what Jake Trotter from ESPN Cleveland wrote. But don't rule out the possibility of Cleveland making a move for, say, free agent defensive tackle Christian Wilkins, 28, who had 9 sacks and 35 pressures for the Miami Dolphins last season. I mean, just think for a moment. A defensive line with Myles Garrett, Christian Wilkins, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Okoronkwo. I think if you add Christian Wilkins, it's a very low probability of Zadarius Smith returning or really adding any other $10+ million defensive end. And you will likely roll with Okoronkwo, Alex Wright, and Isaiah McGuire kind of rotating at that second defensive end spot. But we know Jim Schwartz loves a good pass rusher from the interior, right? He had Jeffrey Simmons in that spot. We saw Fletcher Cox and a lot of other Philadelphia Eagles thrive in that role back when he was in Buffalo as well. This has been a position that Jim Schwartz historically has gotten a crazy amount of production out of. So what if Jim Schwartz kind of just knocks on Andrew Berry's office and goes, listen, if you get me Christian Wilkins, this defense will be better than it was last year. And that defense was number 1 in the NFL last year in yards allowed. I think Wilkins will ultimately, though, be too expensive, but I don't think that's going to remove the Browns from at least trying, right? They reportedly were interested in guys like Jesse Bates and Javon Hargrave last offseason. Ultimately, they got more money elsewhere. And I think that's what's likely going to happen in this instance here. But you can't quite rule it out. Christian Wilkins, his Spotrac contract projection is 4 years, $80.9 million. That's an average of 20.2. I think that is way too low. I think Christian Wilkins is going to get a 5-year contract that pays him about $24 to $26 million a season. A little bit below what Aaron Donald got because he's not quite Aaron Donald, but I think Christian Wilkins is going to add a couple extra $1 million to that average, and it's going to be just too rich for the Browns to ultimately pull off. We also talked about this on yesterday's show, but for anyone new viewers, I do feel like it's worth noting that when you look back at the Browns' history in free agency spending, from 2020 to 2022, 3 off seasons with Andrew Berry to start his Browns GM career off, Cleveland spent a whopping $12.4 million in total on the defensive tackle position. And I'm supposed to buy that over the last 2 off seasons, last year and this year, they're going to spend what they spent on Dalvin Tomlinson and spend Christian Wilkins' $100+ million contract. I know Andrew Berry has probably turned a corner a little bit on the way he values the defensive tackle position, and he wants to give Jim Schwartz tools to be successful, but I feel like this is probably a little bit too extreme for a guy like Andrew Berry, who was so light on the defensive tackle spot early on in his Browns GM career, to now go back-to-back off seasons with spending nearly $60 million on Dalvin and probably $100 million on Christian Wilkins. We're talking a combined $160 million on 2 players, when in 3 years, he spent $12.5 million. I just don't think it's in the cards. My prediction is the Browns re-sign 2 of Maurice Hurst, Shelby Harris, and Jordan Elliott. I think Maurice Hurst is the most likely of the bunch to come back. You can make a really good argument that he was the best of all 3 guys last offseason. They all had some really good moments at different times, but I think he's probably going to be the cheapest since he's coming off an injury a little bit, and it's not like he had a great market anyway last offseason. So I think we see Maurice Hurst come back, maybe Shelby Harris. I know he's getting up there in the age column. If Jordan Elliott doesn't get a huge overblown contract from another team, maybe they bring him back on a 1-year deal, similar to what they did with like Taki, for example. But I think we're going to see a similar defensive line to last year, and it's not going to be such an influx with Christian Wilkins. Let's wrap up the show by picking a card. On the 1s and 2s today, we had a switcheroo here at Chat Sports. It is Jeremy Beadley, my good friend Jeremy. He's working with me for the next couple of days, helping me out. So, Jeremy, welcome aboard. Which card do you want to go with?
Oh, I've been thinking the entire show what card I'm going to pick, and I've come to the 8 of Hearts.
8 of Hearts? I like it. It's 1-0 me, by the way, over the producers.
Really?
I got it the other day, so no big deal. Oops.
Okay.
8 of Hearts?
8 of Hearts. What's your card?
I'm going to go with the Jack of Spades.
Jack of Spades. Oh, nice. Audience at home, what are you going with?
Here we go.
Holds for your answer?
2 of Hearts.
Oh, that was my second one.
2 of Hearts.
That was my number 2.
All right, that will do it for us on this edition of the Cleveland Browns Report. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Sorry for taking up so much of your time today. We will catch up later.